So, will his savant status on the offensive side is going to be challenged here in 2021 minus Kyle Trask? Emory Jones comes in. His passing opportunities limited, of course, in the game time that he's gotten. The wide receiver core is gutted. Just your thoughts about the offensive side of the football in 21.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a completely different offense, obviously. I think one of the things that you hope to see, and I think Florida fans should expect, is the offensive line is going to be a lot better, both because they have an extra year of experience, but also because the guys they probably recruited for a dual threat quarterback, and Emory Jones certainly is that. I mean, he averaged something like 6 or 7 yards per carry over his career thus far, even though the defense basically knows he's running the ball. And so if you're getting 7 yards a pop every time you run it, that's going to make a big difference when you drop back to throw, when that's an actual threat. And up until now, most defenses have just not treated that as a threat, and they're going to have to, and they're going to open things up, and he's going to throw. He's less accurate than Trask, but he's a heck of a lot more mobile than Felipe Franks. So I think what you're going to see is probably sort of a hybrid in the offense where they rely much more on the quarterback running game, but that's going to open up a lot of other things where the windows are much wider than they were for Trask, because oftentimes Trask was throwing into very tight windows because Florida couldn't run the ball.
Yeah, it was pretty astounding, the lack of a running game, because a couple of years ago they were the one team in the nation that had a perfect divide between running and passing in terms of total yardage. It was like a perfect split, and then they wanted to continue to achieve that. But I know that Dan Mullen said at one point, "Hey, we would love to be able to balance it out, but if you can't do it, you can't do it. We're going to do what we do best." And they just said, "Caution to the wind. We're just going to chuck it because that's what we do well." And here they are with a completely different personnel setup here for 21. So if we look, Will, at the defensive side, Todd Grantham, as you mentioned, much to the ire of a lot of fans, is back running the defense. How does the personnel look for 21?
Yeah, it's going to be really young. This is a transition year. You've got, Kyrie Elam at cornerback, but Jason Marshall, the 5-star cornerback who committed to the 2021 class, probably going to get an opportunity to start on the other side. Rashad Torrance and Trevez Johnson are safeties who are going to step in. They're losing pretty much their top 4 defensive backs. Not that their defensive backs played all that well in 2020, but they're losing those top 4 guys. And there wasn't a whole lot. There was a lot of consternation in Gator Nation because they weren't bringing in some of the young guys to get them a lot of reps. But we saw what happens when they brought in those young guys for reps against Oklahoma. And so the good news is that we're probably back to a normal schedule next year where they'll get a couple of games that aren't SEC games. They'll be able to open up, I think USF's on the schedule and Florida A&M. So they'll open up with a couple of teams where they're able to make a few mistakes and still make up for it. But the big thing is they've got a couple of transfers at defensive tackle who've come in, because defensive tackle is really, really, really thin. And Gervon Dexter was really the only guy who'd gotten any real playing time there. Slayton's going to the NFL. Kyrie Campbell's going to the NFL. And so they couldn't stop the run last year either. I mean, they couldn't stop the pass, but they couldn't stop the run. Having a couple of transfers at defensive tackle, I think, makes that a little bit more solid. But I'm expecting the defense to improve off of what it did in 2020. I don't think we're expecting this to be a top 10 or top 20 defense. I think kind of run-of-the-mill average defense is what Florida fans are looking for, and Mullen's going to have to do yeoman's work on the offensive side of the ball again if Florida's going to be competing with Georgia and Alabama.
Will, is there a apprehensive type of approach to 21 from the Florida fan base, thinking that they've not necessarily eclipsed Georgia, but that 2020 might have just been an aberration and Georgia's going to take it back over?
Sure. I mean, I think JT Daniels played pretty well towards the end of the year, and you had Georgia fans sort of get up on their high horse there towards the end of the year about how well Daniels was playing. But, I mean, he played way better than Stetson Bennett. And so I do think Georgia's offense is going to be at least serviceable. It may not be outstanding, but it's going to be a defense. Florida's defense stopped Georgia's offense last year. So when you put it in that context, you're like, all right, they were pretty bad last year. So they're going to have a better offense. But Georgia's losing a lot of guys on defense too. And so, this is one of the things about college football, and really one of the things about the differences in the programs is I think that when you look at their records, I think Dan Mullen, for the most part, usually gets the better of Kirby Smart in terms of on-field coaching. But Smart's always got more talent. And so it's always a question of who wins out. And last year, Florida had the better quarterback and the better offense, and so they were able to pull it out. The first couple of years, Georgia had the better quarterback with Jake Fromm, and so they were able to pull it out. I think it's going to be interesting to see, is Emory Jones able to be good enough to compete with JT Daniels? And is JT Daniels able to take a step off of what he did the last 3 or 4 weeks of the year, where they weren't necessarily playing the most difficult competition? Florida and Alabama are going to be more difficult opponents for Georgia than JT Daniels has seen thus far. Is how he played against Cincinnati emblematic of how he's going to play all next year? If so, I think Georgia's going to be pretty good. And I think, Florida fans are probably a little bit apprehensive with all the youth that's coming in 2021. I think most fans who are realistic about the program look at 2022 and say that's where we need to target in terms of getting, let's make sure we get all the young guys experience in 2021, win as much as you can. But at the end of the day, it's the experience that you get that'll lead you into 2022 and make you successful.
Will Miles, Gators Breakdown. You can join them with it's Will and it's David Waters right on Gators Breakdown on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform. And also Will's classic college football podcast, 2020 Hindsight. Catch it on iTunes. So, Will, we appreciate you stopping by.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.